Oh, hello. Didn't see you come in. Hi, my name is Abe Schreiner. I'm a painter and a multidisciplinary artist, and I'd like to share some of my work with you today over the past 3 semesters in this MFA program. First off, though, I do want to take a moment briefly to thank my mentor, Shauna Kaplow, for all of her guidance over the course of this semester. And I also wanted to thank Tessa Sutton, who was the artist I worked with last year. I do think the mentorship component of this program is such an asset, and I don't think that can be overstated. 10 minutes is a rather short time to present on 3 semesters worth of my practice and creative development. So I won't be able to share as much as I'd like to, but I will be showing a handful of pieces that represent different ideas and significant developments in my practice. So yeah, to start off, my point of orientation with art has always been as a painter. I'm also a musician, and those things I feel like have always operated on a parallel for me. But I think that for painting, I've really kind of come into my own voice during this program, and you can kind of get a sense of the changes that have occurred in a rather short period of time from left to right on this one. And with this increased skill and self-confidence that comes from constantly producing work, I found myself freed up to experiment and to feel really confident in that. And the work has progressed beyond simply formal abstractions in painting into a realm of increased material investigation and contextualization, driven by my interest in history, language, and the emancipatory potential of art making. And so that is where I'm kind of going to be leading us into in this presentation. We're going to start off with more formal paintings, and then it's going to pretty quickly develop into multidisciplinary and also these kind of parallel practices. So yes, but really what I want to talk about first is art as communication. This theme has really come up a lot for me over the course of especially the past semester as kind of a connecting sort of tether between the different aspects of my practice. I really take seriously the connection with the audience and the ability to communicate with them and to really generate questions. Like I'm not really interested in sort of stating things so much as bringing up questions. I kind of think of my practice as a dispersion, which I've provided a little graph here to help kind of visualize that. I see myself as kind of on the same level as the viewer, and that we're kind of having a mutual interaction in the gallery space or wherever that art is being presented, if it's in a zine or a book form, more personally. Some of these questions may not even have answers, but that's not really so much the concern, because I think that there are a lot of answers that are right and a lot of answers that are wrong. But I think when people come up with answers, I like the idea that they're maybe even finding insights into the work that I didn't see. So there's a cultural critic from the 20th century, Adorno, who, most of his stuff is pretty dense, but I really enjoyed this quote: "Artistic productivity is the capacity for being voluntarily involuntary." And I really liked that this kind of really represented a lot of what my work is all about, is that I'm really trying to reduce the amount of thinking and to get more connected with the tactility of the medium. So in terms of like cultivating my own visual language, there's a real emphasis on mark making, a real attention paid to color relationships and the way that the eyes move around that, and the interaction of lines versus planes, creating dimensionality there, but also dimensionality with the way that the paint is applied between sort of layers of translucence versus total opacity. And so you can see an example of that here. Improvisation is also a huge factor in my work and how it's generated. This does really come most closely connected to my musical background, because I've improvised on instruments, and I really just feel like, the visual medium is another version of using notes. They're their own languages, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, basically just messing around and really kind of just discovering things along the way and being open to that discovery. And really quickly, these are some of my influences, both theoretical and visual. A lot of what Amy Silman and Philip Guston have had to say have had the most impact on my work. And I just wanted to then kind of develop a little bit of a trajectory here in terms of where we're going with this. So my work started out as more pure formal abstraction, and I wanted to explore, it was originally like abstract landscapes, and I wanted to explore what it would be like to remove the horizon line. And actually through removing the horizon line, I sort of entered new horizons. Little joke there. And but then I realized that the imagery was very map-like, and I started to really embrace that. And I also happened to be reading history sort of alongside this. And I was reading history of Germany, and the Holy Roman Empire is this weird sort of collection of sort of semi-autonomous states. And it really got my imagination running about, first of all, like maps themselves are pure abstractions. And even in the example of this map, which is from the early 20th century, it's very colorful. And you know, you have different periods in the history of the empire that are quite profoundly beautiful on their own. So inspired by that, I started to work with these kind of visual prompts. And also on a formal level, really trying to loosen up the hand to kind of make the work really a discovery for myself, as well as for what it produces. So working more with ink and mediums like gouache and casein. I also started to split up the visual field to kind of experiment with how that worked, how one interacts with it. It becomes a sequence. And this is really interesting to me because when you put things next to each other, it's only natural to want to kind of see the comparing and contrasting between them. So, you know, is there a narrative unfolding? What is it? There's no real context, but you kind of are prompted to kind of think of your own. And on a more overt level, I also started creating zines, which was actually really directly inspired by one of my colleagues in the program, Rosario Parker Gordon, who really got me interested in this medium. And it's obviously very direct communication. There's kind of a roughness to it, that sort of quote unquote DIY punk aesthetic, if you will. And I had a photocopy machine. So I was originally just doing it purely with my hands, but then I started to do digital ones, which led me into kind of an interest in kind of critiquing institutions and institutional forms. Like, what is it to be an authoritative text on something? And how do we respond to that? This is another kind of strain of things that I'm not going to spend much time on, but religious iconography has also been a side interest of mine, and abstractions in that form, which have gone into sort of the figurative realm. But I really think that what's interesting to me is became more this notion of institutions and the kind of underlying kind of authoritarian culture that we live with. And, you know, these things can take the form of Catholic Church, or the way that, you know, history is written by the victors and that kind of thing. There's always a bias in these things. And so I was thinking about modes of presentation, and things linked me to the past, one of which was this crazy museum in Philadelphia that sadly is no longer in existence, for the Benjamin Franklin Museum. You had things like this of phalanx of telephones, and then all of these other visual prompts were kind of just coming out of nowhere, like memories of my grandmother's basement. This organ was placed on a platform of artificial grass. And all of this kind of infused itself into these presentation sort of mimicry of presentation. So, you know, what would it look like to have a painting that's not on the wall, that's horizontal? What would it look like to have it be interactive with buttons? or presenting an abstract composition, but giving it the trappings of a classroom wall map. And that led me to getting, and this is really more the fruits of collaboration, because all of a sudden I felt very enabled to really kind of push different ideas that I had kind of been a little, hesitant to, just because out of self-consciousness, I don't know. But I've been writing a lot lately, and so I'm just going to show this really quick. This was in an installation, and it is literally just short stories that I wrote on this roll of receipt paper. And there's an interactivity to it that I liked, but also that the text was slightly too fast to comfortably read. So there's still me kind of like, as the authoritarian, kind of pulling back a little bit from having people with a complete user experience. And this was actually inspired directly from that. And this is, yeah, just an abstract painting in that form. But I do want to wrap things up, and I just want to say real quick that this is kind of the most recent stuff that I've been doing. I really have been thinking more about connecting religion and spirituality and communication, and specifically, and as I showed in the past, the form of the Virgin Mary, and how she is really seen as this grand intercessor between the earth and God, and thinking of her actually as a telephone, as a conduit in that sense, and then playing around with that. What would it look like to send a fax to God? It's a bunch of prayers in Latin, and then fax from God would just be this abstract, garbled stuff. But ultimately, in conclusion, Max Ernst has a great quote: "A painter may know what he doesn't want, but woe be to him if he desires to know what he wants. A painter is lost if he finds himself." And I hope to never find myself. And thanks for watching. And if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Pleasure to see your work. Let's open it up for questions. Let's see. Wonderful job. I do have some questions here. Anna is wondering, is there a process you're wanting to focus on more while looking towards your thesis work?
Thank you for the question. That's a really good question. I do think I want there to be elements of a little bit of, as much of a little bit of each as I can. I definitely like the kind of larger use of ready-made installation type thing, but I've also been spending a lot more time making zines. So I think that there will be printed matter definitely in a book form that will be in the thesis production.
Okay, thank you so much. Emmy says, of all your extensive use of technological and communication materials, they are all old formats, an old telephone or a typewriter. What is the significance of this material choice?
Thank you, Emmy, for asking that. I've thought about that a lot, actually, sort of repurposing old machines that are considered outmoded but are perfectly functional. I mean, that typewriter I was using, that's a great typewriter. It's a really great typewriter, but nobody is ever going to use it. It's from like the late 80s. And I liked this idea of kind of bringing it out of retirement and giving it a new function in the 21st century. And it didn't work very well, broke down a bunch of times. And I was thinking about actually institutions that also struggle to exist in the present day and maybe can't properly in the context of a democratic society. And the Catholic Church, in my opinion, is an example of that, but there are plenty.
Let's do one more quick. Rio says, what is the role of movement in your work? Movement of the painting, movement of the text, movement of the ideas?
Yeah, thanks. There are connections there, and I think that actually goes to even just things I was doing formally with my painting work, where I wanted to really capture movement through the brush strokes. And I think that movement has always been a thing that has interested me also as a musician, the kind of ephemerality of music, but also so many aspects of art experience, right? Like how short of a time or long of a time are you in a gallery, and So having kinetic pieces, I think, speaks to that.
Mhm. Great. Thank you so much, Abe. It was a pleasure to hear you and see your work.
Thank you.
Congratulations again, and best of luck.
Thanks so much.